Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and I do hope you're doing exceedingly well. Loads and loads of love to each and every one of you. Hope you're doing marvellously well. So before we get started, don't forget to get that lovely hot cup of cocoa, tea, coffee, whatever it is you drink. Or if you're feeling like you want to refresh yourself, maybe a glass of lemonade, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Everett, and my story that ultimately led to my Bigfoot encounter happened in 2014, when I was about 17 years old at the time. I was born and raised in rural Kentucky, where I've lived all my life on a small farm with both of my parents and my sister Maya. We are surrounded by many other rural properties in the immediate vicinity that all grow corn, hay and soybeans on a much smaller scale than our larger counterparts. I live in a really beautiful part of Kentucky with forests, high ridges and narrow V-shaped verdant valleys, sharp mountains, pretty ponds, pebbly streams, rivers and silvery lakes. And of course we are the quintessential land of coal, with our tallest landmark being Black Mountain. I'm glad to say that my friends and I have never allowed the modern technology available these days to suppress or subdue our passionate interest, ardent fascination, and inquisitive curiosity for the natural world. So from a very young age we all learnt to hunt, camp, fish and hike. I'm so lucky here because I can literally ride my mountain bike down a long dirt road where I reach a slight hilly embankment that is flanked by high grasses and brambles on its outer edge. But if you walk over a small precipitous clearing and follow a rugged dirt path, you immediately enter a magical area of forest which is idyllic all year round, except of course in the dry season when everything can get very dry and brown and the trees lose all their leaves. The forest consists of statuesque oaks, red maples and yellow polar trees, and this has been my favourite haunt to hang out since I was a very young boy. It is here that I would meet up with many of the local boys. We would explore this incredible forest that goes back for many miles. Words fail me to describe how spectacularly magnificent this shaded sanctuary actually is. I think the vast age of the trees found here adds to their appeal, their mystery and intrigue. These imposing trees rise up to the sky like masterful giants, with the grace of ballet dancers and with boughs that crisscross each other at 100 feet off the ground, providing a vast parasol or canopy above an extensive area. Prisms of light dance through the branches, lighting up this dreamy, enchanting oasis in a soft, luminescent, very subtle light. It's always so spectacularly cool in here, especially in the heart of a sweltering hot summer's day. I love the way the forest floor is literally swathed in lacy ferns, pretty mosses, unusual fungi, interesting shaped boulders, and so much more. You will also find streams of cascading water running through this magical woodland space. There is so much to love about this place. Over the years, if I ever had a single bad day, I would automatically go to the forest to lift up my mood and regenerate my spirit, and it worked every time. My great-great-grandmother, who's a very wise woman, told me a true story once about a man called Gabriel Harris, who lived in the 1800s here in Kentucky. The man was down on his luck and felt as if his life had hit rock bottom, as everything had turned sour for him. His best friend had stolen his longtime sweetheart, and he had suffered huge financial setbacks with a very bad tobacco crop that year that had been eaten away by tobacco rot that had ravaged everything, leaving him penniless. It was then that he decided he would go to the forest to hang himself on one of the trees there, and this is what he wrote about the experience in his own words. The forest beckoned and welcomed me, swaying her leafy boughs like an old friend, and I felt enveloped in her ancient love, while the soft breeze caressed and kissed my cheeks, and the branches of the trees danced, while the leaves rustled and the birds sung their joyful chorus. I was so beguiled by the beauty of this shaded, verdant sanctuary, and so strengthened by the tonic she brought upon my lips, and I drank full cups of its sweet, rich nectar, which restored my lost hope and renewed my vigour and strength. I looked upon the dull rope I held in my hand with so much less appeal, as my desire for the spirit of death to summon me had all but gone, for it had been blown away by the wind. For why would I want to leave this perfect retreat that energized my heart with a renewed sense of purpose? For I knew that, like the trees, I too also belonged, and come what may, I would live to fight another day. Most people knew the story about Gabriel Harris, who wanted to end it all, but after visiting the forest he came to his senses because he was bedazzled by the beauty and the energy of the place that brought things to perspective for him, helping him to realize that there was much to live for. So if you feel down or disheartened here in Kentucky, we always talk about the Gabriel Harris cure, and there is one doctor here who recommends it for all patients suffering from depression. Anyway, back to my story. One day a good friend of mine called Bennett popped over to my farm. I could tell by his unsettled, discomposed countenance that he was very bothered and aggrieved by something that was weighing heavily upon his mind. He was clearly in a desperate state, and I realized it was because he had damaged something in one of his father's cars and was terrified that his father would uncover what he'd done. I imagine he had some kind of accident while out joyriding, but I didn't dare to ask too many questions about the matter, as the less I knew, the better as far as I was concerned. Bennett informed me that it would cost over $500 to fix his dad's car. He didn't have that kind of money to cover the repair costs, but if his father found out what he'd done, he would be in a whole heap of trouble. "What are you going to do?" I asked him. "Well, that's why I'm here," he said. "You do have over $500 in your savings account, don't you? You could lend it to me, and I would pay it all back with interest if you like. Please, I'm so desperate." "I've got over $1,000 in my account," I told him, "but I need every penny of it. I can't afford to lend you a thing." "I just want to borrow $500 of it," Bennett assured me. "I'll pay you back in 6 months, I promise." "Why can you not just come clean with your dad and admit what you've done?" I asked. "I mean, what's the worst thing he can possibly do to you?" "Well, how about kill me?" said Bennett. "Put it this way, he'll ground me for an entire month and make my life a living hell. Do you really want that for me? Come on, bro, please help me out." "I'm sorry, Bennett, I don't want to lend you the money, because when I ask for it back, I'm going to become like a monster in your eyes, and then you'll end up hating and despising me, and it will ruin our friendship for good, and I would simply hate that to happen." "Don't be so ridiculous and melodramatic," said Bennett. "That won't happen to us. We'll always be friends." "All right," I said, "but I want you to sign this paper establishing the fact that this is a loan and that you'll be paying me back within 6 months, no later. Do you understand?" "I understand," said Bennett. "You've saved my life, bro. Thank you so much. You truly are a great friend." I remember I didn't feel positive about this loan at all. My father had always warned me that loaning money to friends was not a good idea, because he assured me that no good deed ever goes unpunished. He warned me that when you ask for the money back, the friend invariably ends up resenting you. I was to discover how right he actually was. Months turned into 2 years, and Bennett had still not paid me back, not even a bean. And I was growing increasingly frustrated and overwrought, especially when I discovered he'd come into some money of his own from a grandmother that had since passed. To add insult to injury, Bennett had bought himself a Chrysler Cruiser, putting his own desires above his obligation to pay me back. Enough was enough as far as I was concerned, and I approached Bennett for my money. "Come on, bro," I said to him. "It's been over 2 years now. You've managed to buy yourself a rather swanky car, so you cannot pretend you can't afford to pay me my $500 that you owe me." Bennett became rather incensed. "Look, bro, I have lots of other expenses at the moment. I'll pay you back when I get the cash flow, I promise. At the moment, I'm really strapped for cash." I remember feeling so outraged, affronted and incensed about this whole thing. I knew it was highly improbable that Bennett would ever pay me back. A boy at my school advised me that his uncle, a man called Rod, was a skillful debt collector. If you give him $100 of the money, he'll get Bennett to cough up the $400 for you, in a legal way, he assured me. I was young, naive, gullible and easily manipulated. I also had little experience with debt collectors, and of course the underhanded tactics that they might incorporate or employ in order to get money back from their clients. At this stage, I was persuaded that Bennett was not going to pay me back, so $100 loss on $500 didn't seem too bad, and so I agreed to this arrangement. But imagine my appalled disgust when I discovered that Rod had beaten Bennett black and blue, demanding my money back. I mean, this is not an ethical way to ask someone to repay a loan. I was absolutely appalled. "What have you done?" said Bennett, arriving at my farm, looking as if he'd been punnelled through a mince grinder, and he was hobbling around my yard, clearly in a great deal of pain, and one of his eyes was totally black. I felt very ashamed. He continued, "Last night, when I was out on the town having a burger at the diner, I was walking down the street holding my girlfriend's hand when this thuggish, very beefy man, built like an ox, pulled me over onto the street, pounded on me, and started beating me up with his powerful fists and demanding me to pay you your $600 back. He said he'd been authorized by you to get your money and all the interest that I owe him. I told you that I would pay you back, bro. What have you done? This dude could have killed me." "I don't know what to say, Bennett. I'm so appalled about what's happened to you. I did hear that the man Rod was a debt collector, and I thought he would legitimately get my money back from you in a legal way. I did not expect him to beat you up like this, nor did I ask him to add on extra money for the hell of it. I'm so sorry. I'll have to sort this out." As you can imagine, I was absolutely incensed and furious by this time, and I quickly phoned up Rod to cancel this whole debt-collecting assignment. "You cannot change your mind on a deal, boy. A deal's a deal as far as I'm concerned. I told you I will get your money back for you, and I will. Tell your friend he owes me $800 now. The price keeps going up. Tick-tock, tick-tock. If he doesn't deliver the goods, he's a dead man." As you can imagine, I couldn't believe what was happening, and I quickly phoned Bennett to tell him what was going on, and that Rod was going to stop at nothing to get the money back and more besides, just to line his own greedy pockets. It was an abysmal, nightmarish situation to find ourselves in. "But I don't have $800, he told me. "What am I going to do? Rod is going to kill me. You've seen what he's like. The guy's a monster." "We could go to the police," I suggested. "What Rod is doing is illegal." "I don't want the police involved," said Bennett. "Don't worry," I told him. "I have a good plan. We'll get Rod to meet you in the forest, and all three of us will hide behind the trees. And when I say three of us, I'm talking about Jordan and Max, who will come along as well. We'll all have our rifles together, and if he tries to beat you up, we'll threaten to shoot him. We'll then talk him around, and if he doesn't cooperate with us, we'll tie up his hands and feet together and put him in the back of your car and take him straight to the police station and accuse him of trying to kill you for money, with all of us as witnesses to back up your statement." "Are you sure it will work?" Bennett asked. "Well, have you got any better suggestions?" I asked. And so it was, we arranged that the forest would be the rendezvous point for Bennett to hand over the $800 to Rod, which of course he didn't have. "Why the forest?" asked Rod, sounding suspicious. "Is this some kind of a set-up, boy? I wasn't born yesterday." "No, of course not," I insisted. "Bennett wants a place where he feels safe, away from the prying eyes of his parents, as he doesn't want them involved in this whole ghastly mess." "Fair enough," said Rod. "So he's got the money, I take it?" "Yes," I said. "Well, you'll only get $300 out of the 8. The rest is mine," said Rod. "I don't do this job for peanuts, you know." I was not about to argue with a man who uses his fists to get exactly what he wants. "Fine," I said. It must have been about 10 o'clock that night, when 4 of us stealthily ventured into the forest, wearing our headlamps above our head. I'm glad to say that it wasn't too dark, as the glistening pearly moon was very nearly full, and there was a scattering of silvery stars that afforded us a decent light. It's funny how different the forest feels at night. It really was rather surreal taking up our hiding places behind the various oak trees. "What are we going to do if Rod brings reinforcements?" asked Jordan. "What do we do then?" "Well, if the worst comes to the worst," I said, "we'll have to call the police. But let's hope we can talk Rod around. I don't get the strong impression that he's very bright. He's all muscle, beef and brawn, without much brain, I have to say." "I'm not sure you can actually talk a hooligan like him around," said Jordan reflectively. "Does a leopard ever change its spots? I think not." I remember 100 things were going on in my mind as we all waited on tender hooks for Rod to eventually arrive. Imagine if Jordan was right and Rod brought an aggressive dog along with him, or worse still, a couple of his gangster friends. Maybe they would be brought along for backup. What would we do then? I realised with absolute horror I hadn't actually thought through this plan thoroughly enough, but it was far too late, as Rod would be here any moment. My worst fears were confirmed when we heard the ominous heavy footfall and suddenly saw Rod arriving in the forest, along with 2 heavily built men that looked like mean Rottweilers that were wearing string vests that showed off their powerful, intimidatingly heavily tattooed biceps, along with blue jeans and belts with halties attached, containing pistols. My heart sank as I realised even with our weapons we were no match for these men, who looked so nasty and vindictive that they would not hesitate in a moment to kill us. I was certain of that fact. I quickly indicated for Jordan to call the police on his cell phone, as I knew we were no match for these thugs. Rod swaggered proudly towards Bennett, with a cocky grin upon his face, with his 2 bolstering reinforcements shadowing behind his left and right shoulders like baleful bodyguards. "Where is my $800 that you owe me? I want it now." "I haven't got it here with me," cried Bennett, trembling. "My friend's bringing it over. He'll be here any minute. Just wait a little longer." "Wait for what?" asked Rod. "Have I not waited long enough, boy? I'm growing tired of all your shenanigans. Don't you think I've got better things to do than go chasing after pitiful amounts of money for clients like this? So where's the $800? "My friend will be here any minute," said Bennett, stalling for time. At this, Rod became furiously enraged. He began to violently kick Bennett very, very hard with his leather boots. Bennett let out a gut-wrenching scream because he was in so much agonising pain that literally travelled through the forest like a wild, desperate alarm call. I was so terrified that buckets of sweat were pouring down my forehead. My heart was thundering in my chest like a drum. I quickly wondered should I intervene or not, to protect Bennett, or to wait for the police to arrive. I wasn't sure what to do. I admit I didn't feel confident tackling these intimidating men, and my courage dissipated and was vanquished by an overwhelming, crippling fear. What if the police didn't get here in time? I was almost certain that Rod would kick Bennett to death, and it would all be my fault. I'd got us into this dreadful mess. All of a sudden we could hear this thunderous commotion that sounded like a rhino racing through the thicket at a hell of a speed. It was a terrifying noise, but I noticed Rod was so caught up in kicking Bennett and seemed to be enjoying torturing the boy that he didn't hear anything at all, which was extraordinary. Bennett was yelping like a frightened puppy, with his body now on the forest floor, with Rod's heavy boots thrust upon him. The next thing that happened is so extraordinarily surreal, for help arrived for us in the nick of time from a very unusual, unlikely source, in a manner we could never have anticipated in our wildest dreams or greatest imaginings. For suddenly, hurling its overlong arms around Rod, was no other than the legendary creature known as Bigfoot. He stood erect and proud upon his 2 tree-trunk-sized legs, at about 10 feet off the ground, and 3 feet in width across the upper shoulders. I think the thing that stunned me the most was the colossal size of this Bigfoot. It was like being in the presence of a mighty beast, rather like King Kong, as it was every inch as burly as it was muscular, and was covered in long, wavy, dark, glorious hair. It possessed a pyramid-shaped head that seemed to mould into its shoulders without any neck. The creature possessed a very human-like face, although the features did appear to be obscured, as the light was not that good. It was easy to discern that the Bigfoot was visibly upset. He seemed to perceive what was happening through his very intelligent, discerning eyes. He observed poor Bennett lying curled up in a fetal position on the ground, trying desperately to protect himself from the blows he was receiving from Rod's heavy boots. He was covering his head and eyes with his hands and arms and was whimpering. The Bigfoot sensed that Rod was the aggressor and the perpetrator and immediately came to his rescue. When Rod saw the Bigfoot, his eyes were astonished. They grew as wide as saucers, and his mouth dropped open in surprise, for even next to the Bigfoot, he looked puny and pathetic by contrast. Rod began to fiddle desperately with the firearm in his holty, but the Bigfoot lunged towards him, grabbed him around the waist, and hurled him in the air several times, as if he was catching a frisbee. Rod was screaming, "Shoot him! Shoot him!" to his friends, who were too petrified to take on the magnificent beast, and instead of assisting their friend, they ran away like two frightened rabbits. They were indeed fair-weather friends, concerned only in saving their own skins, and certainly not Rod's. Finally, the Bigfoot just tossed Rod over his shoulders with a look of disgusted revulsion upon his face, as if he was throwing out a stinking piece of garbage. I watched in stupefied awe as Rod's body flip-flopped backwards in a dodgy-looking somersault and precariously landed on the ground. We could hear that unfavourable snapping sound of Rod's neck, and we knew immediately that he must be dead. The magnanimous Bigfoot glanced at Bennett briefly. His eyes looked so gentle and kind, and Bennett visibly relaxed because he sensed he was now safe. In that moment we were not afraid, as we were all eyewitnesses to the astonishing kindness shown in this tender-hearted, benevolent Bigfoot's eyes. We all knew in that instant that the creature had graciously come to our rescue when he had heard Bennett's frantic cries. We could now hear police sirens as they rushed into the woods, but by then the Bigfoot had long since glided away. To cut a long story short, the police falsely believed that Rod had been killed by a bear, and we let them believe that erroneous story. We were never ever going to tittle-tattle on the gallant, amiable Bigfoot that put an end to Rod's duplicitous behaviour. I'm sorry to say, but I have no sympathy for Rod and the likes of people like him. As far as I'm concerned, anyone that exploits other people for his own ends cannot be described as human. In the end, I did get my money back from Bennett, but I gave it all to charity. It had become contaminated, in my opinion, by this whole grievous incident. I think the moral of my story is to never lend money if you want it back. It's not worth souring a friendship over a loan. So if you cannot afford not to get your money back, then don't lend it in the first place. That's my firm opinion. This incident with the Bigfoot happened about 5 or 6 years ago. My advice to anybody is if you're in trouble in a forest, call out for help. You never know who might come to your aid. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an amazing story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Until next time, goodbye and good night.